My name is Donna Maske, and I'm with the Seguin Art League, and I'm making a video today for our summer video series. The topic that we are videoing today is beginning use of alcohol inks. One of the most important things about alcohol inks is the surface on which you're applying the inks. If you use a non-porous surface like this, the ink is just going to suck into the surface. It's not going to do anything interesting. All the things alcohol inks do will not happen. Here is an example done on acetate, just plain like an overhead projector sheet. I've got it laying on a piece of white cardstock so you can see what it's doing. But see the difference in these two. How this one has all these neat blooms and textures and the way the colors work together, the dark edges. That's what you need to have happen. So some of the surfaces you could use are like the acetate. Another surface you could use is called Yupo paper. And Yupo paper is, this one is by Ranger Inks, and it's made for things like alcohol inks. It's actually plastic. Now they have lots of different colors of it. They have different surfaces. They have different weights. They have different sizes. This small size 5x9 I got at Hobby Lobby. It has 10 sheets in it. The other thing that you need to know about alcohol inks are the fumes. You need to be in a well-ventilated area because, after all, they are alcohol-based and they're going to smell like alcohol. Alcohol inks, you don't have to mix them. The formulation, the way it works, they're already mixed. I have got two different brands of alcohol ink here. This one is by Ranger Ink, excuse me, by Ranger, and this one is by Pinata, by Jacquard. If you have older ones of these, it'll have a picture of a mountain and it'll say Adirondack on it. The other major brand is called Marabou. You can also use the Copic ink refills. This is a Sharpie marker. It's an alcohol marker. So are Copic markers. So the refills for them are basically the same formula as the alcohol inks in these bottles, and a lot of people like to use them because of the colors. Ranger has a huge amount of colors now. I think it's up to something like 60. I got the Pinata because I was able to get an Exciter pack that had a bunch of colors already in it. It also had a metallic and a pearl white. Okay, the fixative, that's what Ranger calls their metallic. I'm looking for the metallics. Okay, and Pinata just calls theirs a color like rich gold. As you can see at the bottom, the colorant will go down and stay on the bottom, so you do have to shake up. Okay, let's go ahead and start and see what the alcohol inks will do. I am going to be using a few things with the alcohol inks. I'm going to be using alcohol. That's what's in this little bottle. It's got some other alcohol ink in it because I was using it yesterday. This is 90% alcohol. You need to use 90% or above. If you get to 70%, it won't work as well. You can also get 99%, but you have to ask for it over the counter. I'm using a small brush to apply the alcohol with. I have a syringe that I can get some alcohol out of here and apply. And I've got this nifty little tool. It's a brush marker that's empty that you can put either alcohol or water into. And they have these at Joann's and Hobby Lobby. Okay, let's take some colors. I'm going to start with, this is Sunshine Yellow. This is a Ranger ink. And I'm just going to apply some drops. And see what it does? It just starts moving. The minute you drop it onto your surface, the ink starts moving. As you can see, it's getting dark out, a little bit darker outline, and it's darker in the center. The next color that I'm going to apply is called Calabaza Orange. This is the Pinata ink. You see how those blend into each other and there's a dark line there? Okay, watch what happens when I put the ink there. See how that moves the yellow out, but it doesn't blend with the yellow? Okay, I can put some on the outside here, here, a little tiny bit there. See how neat it looks when it moves out and blooms and you get those different rings of color. So working with the orange and the yellow. Let's go ahead now and add a darker color to that. Let's add some Senorita Margarita. I love the color names that Pinata has for their alcohol inks. This is a darker red. It's actually a magenta, but it's going to blend a little bit with the orange and become red. So I'm adding little bits. You can cover your entire surface. You can leave some white and have some negative spaces. There, those are design choices that are up to you. You see how nicely those things all blended. Now let's use some alcohol. I am going to take the alcohol brush marker. Get some alcohol flowing out of it. Come on. Okay, when I start dropping little bits of alcohol in here, see how what happens? The alcohol is causing the alcohol ink. It's blending with it and making it get lighter. Okay, so you get some more interesting things. Let's say you don't want it to be that big. You might take a brush and add smaller areas. You can also use a ball tip stylus with different sizes. Okay, and you can really decide where you want the alcohol to go with the brush. You can take more time. Less comes out than it does with the brush tip marker. You can see what I'm doing here. So you can add like this. Let's go ahead and just sprinkle some on it. You can see what happens when you do that. Okay, so you're getting a lot of interesting textures from the mixture of the alcohol ink and the alcohol. The other thing I can do is I can use some mister, and I'll just mist a little section like right here, and you get a different texture. Okay, let's move this one out of the way, and we are going to try to do one on the acetate. And on this one, I'm going to use some different colors. That was a warm palette. Those colors are also analogous because they're side by side on the color wheel. We are going to use some rainforest green, and I'm putting bigger drops on here because I'm going to do something a little bit different with this one. And we're going to put some Baja blue. And what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to add some alcohol with the syringe, and I'm going to start moving this around. And the more alcohol you add, the more it'll move. You notice this tray that I have here, you can get a Lazy Susan, which works really well, but I'm not too worried about my surface or getting the alcohol ink on something because I have dedicated this tray to use with the alcohol ink, so I don't have to worry about it. One of the things you might want to do is use gloves when you're using alcohol ink. It doesn't bother me to get ink on my hands when I go home. I will just simply clean them up with a scrubby pan. But if you don't want your manicure to get messed up, or you don't want to have stains on your hands, by all means wear gloves and use something like this. The Lazy Susan's nice because you can move this around. I'm adding some yellow in some of the areas. That is the last of the pinata of lemon yellow. Let's add some more of the golden yellow. I want there to be some lighter areas. Okay. Then I'm going to add some alcohol into it because it's pretty dark. And I'm going to use the marker and start adding some lighter areas in there. So you have all these neat runs going on because of what you did. There's other things that you can use to move the ink. You can use a hair dryer. You can use an airbrush. You can use the canned air that you get to blow your keyboard for your computer. All those things will move this around. And if you put less ink on there and more alcohol, and I'm going to do one of those next, it will be more wispy and ethereal looking. See, I'm going back here where some of the yellow was and adding some alcohol so you can see some of this yellow better. Okay. So this will have some neat, really dark spaces and some lighter spaces, so it'll be interesting to work with. So this is, as you can see, it works just as well on this acetate as it does on the regular Yupo paper. And it's a lot cheaper if you want to work on that. Another thing that you can use is ceramic tiles. You can go to the Home Depot or Lowe's and get really cheap little small ceramic tiles. I'll lay this over here. I don't want to mess your camera up. Okay, so you can get small ceramic tiles and you can use the alcohol inks on those. And then what you need to do after that, after you've made one, is you need to use some resin to coat it with so that the colors will stay. Okay, we're going to do an ethereal one. We're going to do one that's going to have less ink and more alcohol and move it around so you can see what it does. So I put some ink right there, and I'm going to put some alcohol, and I'm going to get quite a bit more alcohol and see if I can get some into my syringe. And I'm going to start moving it around with the alcohol. Let's put a lot of alcohol. See what it'll do. There we go. Okay, this is where you could be blowing it with one of the items that I mentioned. But see how light and ethereal that's and cloud-like that's getting, where you don't have that much color because you've got a lot of alcohol going on. There we go. See it moving. So you could do something like that and make a really neat background for something. Now we can go back and add a few drops here and there. It's going to bleed out. ink. You're gonna have to use a brush because I think that's just about empty. One thing about alcohol inks is you don't really have control over them. You don't really know what they're going to do. You can have in your mind what you want to make when you start, but a lot of times the alcohol ink just won't cooperate with you. It just won't do what you want it to. It's going to do what it's going to do. That's something that you need to keep in mind when you're working with alcohol inks, as if they have a mind of their own. And they really like to do their own thing. I'll tell you what, let's add a little purple with that. Alcohol inks dry pretty quickly. One thing that you don't want to do is try to use a heat gun if you're trying to dry it. Use a blow dryer. If you use a heat gun, what will happen is the alcohol ink will, not the alcohol ink, I'm sorry, the paper will warp all over the place on you. Okay, so now I'm trying to make, there we go, trying to make some of this purple bleed out into there. There we go. So there you see, that's a kind of a really interesting ethereal effect that you can go back and do some really cool things on top of. Okay, the next thing that I'm going to show you is the, what Ranger calls a fixative, or the metallics. Okay, the metallics don't always work the same way as the regular alcohol inks do. Let's start with some green. Okay, and then I'm going to add some yellow. And I'm going to add a little bit more green over here. And then I'm going to add some fixative. Let's find the pinata. I'm going to try to use the pinata. You see, I have to shake it up quite a bit. Okay, so it's bleeding out. It looks pretty cool. But when you try to run and make it do some of the things the other thing was doing, it won't look like this. But that looks pretty cool like that. So let's add some in some of the darker areas. So you could just leave it like that and let that be it. Let's get back to the thing that I have here that has all the alcohol on it. And let's put a little bit of the fixative. There we go. So we're going to make some of that run and see what it does. Might just have a big old mess, you never know. See how it's starting to break up and form these little bitty tiny like globules on there? That's something that it tends to do. And you can make that work for you because it'll kind of outline things and make things look really cool when it does that. Okay, we're going to let that go, but you see what that has done? It's made it look pretty neat. It has blended in some and made the little speckles some so that it's, there we go. So you're saying, okay, I have all these really cool surfaces. What am I going to do with these? Well, some of the things that you can do with them, you can use stencils on them. You can use stamps on them. And one of the things I like to do is I like to go back on the surfaces after I've made them. As you see that I started to do here, and work back into them and add other kinds of things to them. This is what I did where I turned some of the shapes into flowers. You know, some of these are going to be really abstract and some are going to be more realistic. Here's one that I did yesterday that I went back and worked into. Okay, here's one that I did yesterday that was similar to this one that I went back and outlined some negative spaces and did a few things too. Okay, let me find I have one that's got, here it is. This one has a lot of the gold in it. You can see, you know, some of the things it did. I went back into this one and I used a Posca pen. Okay, Posca pens are made by Uni, and they are acrylic pens. They're opaque, so they're real handy to go over things like this. This one is a white one, and you can go back into an area like this. So I could go back and make little white dots that I could add into here to add to the texture, or I can you can see that I'm doing right here, or I can, you know, draw lines or whatever I want to do with these Posca pens. They come in all different colors and they have metallics. Okay, one of the other things that you can use on these are Sharpie pens. Now, this is done on a watercolor background, but it'll give you an idea of something you could do if you want to do something more realistic. These are brown Sharpies, and these are pen and ink sketches of coral. So if you're more a fine artist and you want to do something more like this, these alcohol inks make a really neat, colorful background to do something like this on. That might be a good thing for this one. The thing that you have to know if you're using Sharpies or Posca pens or anything like that on these alcohol ink things that you've made, you have to constantly go back and clean them off, because when you start working on this surface, they get buildup. As you can see, I'm working into this here, and in a little while it's going to start building up. It won't be as dark, and then I'll have to go back and clean it, and you just go back on a sheet of white paper like this and clean it off. Okay, to recap. Okay, the surface you need to use is not plain paper. You need something like the Yupo paper or the acetate. You need to remember that these are alcohol based, so they smell like alcohol, so you want to have plenty of ventilation. You need to make sure, if you don't want your hands to be stained, that you wear gloves and that you have something underneath that you can work on so you won't stain your surface. A surface like this nice, beautiful vintage metal table, you could just spray alcohol on it and it'll wipe right off. But if you've got a really neat countertop that's marble or concrete or one of these things that's really porous, you want to use something like this. And you can cover this with plastic wrap or something like that and then get rid of it after you got done. So that's the end of our video today for the Seguin Art League Summer Video Series. Thank you. Bye.